Welcome back to the Animated Sourcebook Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the Peloponnesian War and why it happened and why it exactly happened. I'm going to tell you guys the truth. I'm going to tell you what you're not going to see in most videos or history books, okay? To begin with, here's why it actually happened. The Mines of Luarion. My favorite thing to read about in history is the economic side of history. The economics, the money, right? The different fiscal policies of different governments and stuff like that. So when I was in my undergraduate, I took a class on ancient Athens. And I decided to write my paper on the Peloponnesian War just like a lot of people did. Because a lot of what we talked about in the class was the Peloponnesian War. And I wanted to focus on the financial aspect of the Peloponnesian War. And as I went along, I realized something. The reason why Athens was able to build a big fleet was because of the revenue gotten from the mines of Luarion, the silver that was mined there. We know this through direct archaeological and contextual evidence that this is true. So, now I can't remember off the top of my head a lot of the dates, but not too long before the rise of Athens and their fleet, the mines of Luarion started getting mined by the Athenians. And this brought in so much money that it is what allowed them to build their fleets. Now we know this. The sources themselves tell this. The Athenian sources that we have literally tell us what years and when their fleets were built, right? And the sources, if I remember correctly, I might be wrong about this one, but I'm pretty sure the sources directly say that the revenues and the money gotten from the mines of Luarion were directly spent on building the ships that made up the Athenian fleet. So think about that. If you think about it, it wasn't politics. I mean, of course, politics and other stuff have to do with it. But if you think about the core of it, it wasn't politics. It wasn't geopolitics. It wasn't the rivalry between Sparta and Athens that sparked the Peloponnesian War. It's the fact that this mine was discovered by Athens. They mined it. It brought in the modern equivalent, personally speaking to me, the modern equivalent of billions of dollars, and it allowed them to build a giant fleet. Because if you think about it, if Athens doesn't build a giant fleet, if Athens doesn't become an overseas empire like they did, then the Peloponnesian War would not have occurred. Now, one of the best books for this is this book right here. This is a great book. Anyone who wants to learn about this or learn about how much it cost to do this, read this book, Financing the Athenian Fleet. Because, look, when you start adding up the costs of how much it cost them to build the ships and how much it cost them to actually pay their sailors, it was a huge amount. So much money. The modern equivalent of millions, possibly billions of dollars. I mean, because the Athenians paid their sailors. They did. And we have their rates. Certain sources tell us, one of the main sources I used for my paper in my undergraduate was, oh God, of course I can't think of his name right now, but he, the Greek historian who was an Athenian naval commander, right? He was an admiral, and he wrote a book. I can't remember what his name is, but I'll put his name at the top of the thing when I go back and edit. But he tells us exactly how much each type of sailor was paid. And when you start looking at how much they had to be paid, it was a lot. And this isn't surprising. If you look at the war between America and Japan, you look at the core of why it happened. The core of why it happened is not geopolitics. It's because both America and Japan had giant navies. They had giant navies, and they both had control over territories in the Pacific. To me, it's the same thing with the Peloponnesian War. You got two guys who have control over different islands or different territories in the same area, One of them builds a huge navy, the other one has a big army, whatever. They end up fighting, right? Now, obviously, geopolitics has a huge part to play in why these wars happen. But to me, in my opinion, as someone who likes to focus on the economics of history, it is the money and the military aspect to why it really happens. Because none of these wars are possible if these countries don't have revenue to build their fleets. But anyway, and I'll say this real quick, that's really funny. When I proposed this to my class, in my ancient Athens class, crickets. I mean crickets. I mean, look, like we all know, historians, they don't talk about money a lot. I mean, that's the truth. Like most videos you watch on YouTube, the guys we like, Kings and Generals, Invicta. I mean, look, as much as I like those guys, as much as they do make videos about money and stuff like that sometimes, most of the stuff is about battles and wars and tactics and blah, blah, blah. And I love that stuff. And government, I love that stuff. But to me, most things are about money and the law in terms of history, especially money. And it's just not talked about a lot. I mean, like, look at Kings and Generals. Have they made a single video about the mines of Luarion? No. Actually, I commented on one of their videos, and they were like, what is that? And I explained to them what it was, and they were like, oh, yeah, right. It's like, because look, let's be honest here. Like, a lot of these channels we watch, like Kings and Generals and stuff, do these guys really know what they're talking about? Maybe. I mean, I love their videos, but most of these dudes aren't actual heavy researchers, and if they do, they're mostly just reading other people's ideas. Anyway, I don't want to talk too much about that. But look, check this book out. Check this book out. Okay? Because one of the things you realize when you start reading about the Athenian fleet is how much it costs. I mean, navies cost so much money. I would argue a lot of the times navies cost more money than an army. I mean, ships are so expensive. It takes so long to build them. It takes so long to train the crew. Navies are a very, very expensive thing. And so if you think about it, without the mines of Luarion, the Athenians would not have had the revenue, would not have had the money to build their ships. And yeah, in my class when I proposed this, like, crickets. Literally, I mean, like, that's basically what happens if you try to make anything in history about money. You know, like, that's just not a popular thing. People want to hear about geopolitics. They want to hear about political rivalries. They want to hear about individuals and generals and men, which all that is equally important. But what's also important, if not more important, is the money aspect. I mean, even my professor was grilling me. I mean, it's like they didn't believe me. It's like, I even got questions in my class that was like, you really believe that they spent that much money? Like, I had those, like, they were asking me, like, do you really believe the Athenians spent that much money? And I was like, of course. I was like, they had a giant fleet of, like, I can't think of it on top of my head. Was it 300, 400, 500 ships? They had a massive navy. And I remember explaining that in my class, like, look, it's a giant navy. Of course it costs a lot of money, and of course it costs a lot of money to pay their sailors. And I don't think they're lying that they had to pay their sailors. Why would they lie about that? Why would the ancient Athenian sources lie about having to pay the wages to their sailors? What would they benefit in accounts from lying about that? So you're going to get a lot of pushback from this. Because again, people don't like to look at the monetary reasons for why wars and different stuff happen. But this is why it happened. If you think about it chronology-wise, the Athenians were a smaller city, a smaller state. They found the mines. All this money started coming in, and they were like, oh, they decided to spend it on their navy instead of their army. Think about how significant that is. Athens could have chosen to use the revenues from the mines of Luarion on their army. Like, you know, Sparta had a bigger army. But they chose their navy. They chose to build their navy, and they chose to build an overseas empire in this little pocket of the Aegean Sea, as we see on the map right there. But yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I'm going to make more videos about this because I think it's really interesting. The Peloponnesian War is one of my most favorite things to read about. And honestly, I think one of the things that's surprising about the fact that Sparta ended up winning the Peloponnesian War is that Athens seemed to be financially stronger. in my opinion, it seems like Athens had a bigger economy and they had more money. So it's surprising that they didn't win, because usually the country that has more money and has a stronger economy is generally going to win a conflict. Is generally going to win the war that they are fighting. So yeah, check this book out. It's not the only book on this, but it is an incredible book on the different aspects of what the Athenians were doing with their navy. It goes into great detail about the estimated amount of pay and different things like that they had to pay their sailors. And just in terms of curiosity, it's amazing. I mean, I was blown away when I found it. And I was blown away that nobody had talked about it. I mean, in our classes, we read so much stuff about the Peloponnesian War, right? And again, none of it was about the mines of Luarion. None of it was about how did Athens actually find the money to build the giant fleet that they had. At no point in my class did we even discuss that. And again, when I proposed this paper, people, it's like, you start talking about stuff that other ancient historians don't know about, and these people think they know what they're talking about. It doesn't get pretty. And look, my professor is a smart guy. I mean, he knows more about ancient Greece than I do, but he didn't know anything about this, And that's what's crazy about this. When you start digging deeper into stuff like this, you get hard pushback. You get big pushback because, again, people want to argue that it's geopolitics and that it's like generals and individuals who cause wars, not money, right? Not finances, but it really is. I mean, it really comes down to whether you have money and you have the money to buy and spend money on a fleet. So, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it really is crazy, and it's so interesting that if you think about it, it shows how advanced technology was in ancient Greece. They had advanced advanced ways of mining, and because when you mine, you have to wash it, right? You have to break down and wash the deposits, right? So you can extract the actual stuff that's worth from it, right? And one of the books that I have actually goes into great detail about exactly what it's an article I found for my research paper, but exactly what the Athenians did, because, like we have found the mine. Like, the mine is there, and we've done excavations at the mine. So, and we know exactly about the different mining techniques, because if you think about it, it's technology and money. Right? Like, if Athens didn't have advanced mining technology, they would not have been able to extract the silver from the mines of Luarion, and they would not have boosted their economy. But we'll talk about this in the next video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more topics like this on ancient history. I'll see you guys next time.